Hello everyone, I don't really know how to start this video right now, so say hi to Kenji. Thank you very much, Kenji. But yes, the main topic of today, of course, is Jojo Siwa, because things right now are not looking good for her. And I understand that I've spoken about Jojo Siwa quite a lot over the last 6 months, but there's so many reasons to keep on speaking about her. And as most of you probably know by now, Jojo Siwa was exposed heavily earlier this year by Leigha Sanderson and her mother Angie Sanderson in a situation where Jojo's own pop group XOMG Pop was called out by Leigha and Angie for severely mistreating children in the group from the ages of 9 to 14 years old, in particular Leigha herself, who was a member, and some of the things that allegedly took place not only had physical implications but also severe financial and mental implications. And just in general, my friends, the entire situation was a sad state of affairs because it was a gross representation of the child entertainment industry, but it also displayed to us that somebody who clearly is a victim of that same industry had now become the same issue that was causing so many problems in that industry. Jojo Siwa pretty much became everything that she had been critical and is still critical of to this day. And look, I understand if you didn't know anything to do with that situation, you may be a little bit confused right now. But if you're in that situation, I have a video right here going through pretty much every aspect of these allegations, and I'm not going to go through all of the finer details in today's video because I want to go through more recent things that have happened with Jojo Siwa, which in my opinion very much do relate to the previous situation, but I don't really think there's a need to go through every single detail after I've done it so many times. Because yes, my friends, in my opinion, things are undoubtedly getting worse for Jojo Siwa behind the scenes. What's interesting is Jojo, despite being talked about so much right now, isn't, in my opinion, being spoken about for the right reasons. I feel like there are plenty of things that could be spoken about right now, but instead we're focused on this. Jojo is mothering is a thing I keep seeing, and it's fair to think that, but to me personally, there are a lot of distractions from things that are actually going on behind the scenes right now involving Jojo Siwa, and the main one being, there is an individual, Leigha Sanderson, right now making a documentary which goes through the severe mistreatment she received on Jojo and Jessalyn Siwa's own show. But what makes this even more ironic is what we're now going to get into, and that is Jojo Siwa herself recently featured in a documentary which speaks about the mistreatment of children in the entertainment industry. It's an incredibly weird and ironic thing that she's done here, given literally everything that I've spoken about over the last year on my channel. But things don't just end there, because there are plenty of other things that we need to go through today which make this situation oh so much worse, such as a big Reddit account being leaked which show plenty of exposés involving Jojo and Jessalyn Siwa, an interview between Jojo and Abby Lee Miller which do just make things 100 times worse, schedules being leaked which gives us more of an insight into everything involving the world of the child entertainment industry. But yes, we're gonna get into it. Please subscribe, my friends. If you do subscribe, Kenji will be fed, and I mean, you should feel better. Sorry, I can't even say that. Kenji will definitely be fed, but if you want to subscribe to the channel, please do so. I'd really appreciate it. I'm trying to hit 1.1 million subscribers, and 50% if you aren't subscribed makes me very sad. Please do it right now. But yes, let's get into things. So ladies and gentlemen, when I heard the news that Jojo Siwa was going to be featuring in a documentary created by Demi Lovato speaking about the issues in the child entertainment industry, at first I thought to myself, I mean, I guess it makes sense. Jojo Siwa, someone whose entire life has been turned into a brand and being controlled by Nickelodeon and other corporations and streaming services. I mean, I guess of course this person would want to appear in this documentary. But then, you know, you take a few seconds and you remember to yourself, that actually doesn't make much sense anymore. Because aside from what we went through in the beginning of the video, this is Jojo Siwa. Yes, the individual that got famous from Dance Mums, and that show has spawned a lot of controversy. Not only is Dance Mums an absolutely horrific show, which still to this day is profiteering of children having breakdowns and crying due to the stress put onto them via that show, But also, it spawned Abby Lee Miller, an individual who has faced multiple levels of scrutiny like this, and this. And JoJo, you think, given that the fact that not all, but a lot of her former castmates on that show have spoken about the mistreatment on there, you think, oh, she's featuring in this documentary, she also will be speaking up against dance mums. But obviously no, JoJo over the years has been somebody who has infamously defended Abby Lee Miller no matter what, and she even recently did an interview with Abby herself where she once again defended Abby Lee Miller. So no, aside from what happened with Leigha Sanderson, just JoJo's, I guess, neglect of all her former castmates on Dance Mums, to me personally, is just incredible levels of hypocrisy that she is featuring in this new documentary. Now, the documentary is titled Child Star, and pretty much what it actually does is, yes, it goes through the child entertainment industry and the sheer horrors that takes place in this industry, how it profits off children, but also severely neglects children in that process. It's genuinely a pretty good documentary to watch, and it really does just show how terrible this industry is, and how it goes through all of this is by speaking to specific stars, and yes, one of those stars is indeed Jojo Siwa. And you know what, I have actually sat through this documentary. It was actually a bit of a difficult process, because not only did I have to get a VPN, but I also had to then buy a gift card from Best Buy because my PayPal wasn't working on the app despite having a VPN, and then I got into Hulu. I believe that's the streaming service that has it, and yeah, eventually I got there, but then I decided, you know what, if I'm going to go to all that effort, I also then actually went and watched Jojo Siwa's own show, JoJo's Dance Pop Revolution, which is the show that obviously spurred all the controversy this year, because I have actually, watched clips from the show, but I've never gotten the sheer willpower to sit through the whole thing. But no, now I have, and my friends, it's honestly even worse than I possibly thought. And when you put that show up side by side with this documentary, it makes the whole thing even more confusing, because I mean, why is JoJo featuring in this documentary when she herself is clearly guilty of everything that documentary is criticizing? Because the documentary starts by saying that Hollywood turns children into a commodity. They'll put a monetary value on you as a human being and make you feel less. You'll lose friends because of this industry, gain corporate goals, and the whole thing will be a mental game that no child should have to face, and it will completely mentally ruin you over the years, given the sheer amount of contracts, confusing situations, horrible things that you'll be put through as a child. And I just started to think everything that's being described there is everything that is here. And then around 30 minutes into the documentary, and yes, obviously I'm not going to show clips from the documentary because I don't want to, get in trouble with copyright issues, but 30 minutes into the documentary, they start to discuss Miley Cyrus and how she was pretty much the embodiment of the child entertainment industry when she was a child. Everybody wanted to be Miley. If you saw her on TV and you were a child, you wanted to have the rich, famous lifestyle that looked so wonderful that she was clearly leading, and the industry as well, they absolutely adored her because she was bringing in so much business and money. And money is obviously the whole key thing here, because when you stop making these people money, they will no longer love you and throw you to the side, which is absolutely what happened with Miley Cyrus, which they then go on to discuss in this documentary when Miley no longer wanted to be just a child star. And then they basically go on to explain this kind of machinery, algorithmic sort of style that Hollywood has, where they will take a random child and put them through this machine of they were a regular child and now they're a Hollywood star featuring on Nickelodeon and hosting all these award shows or even featuring in them. That's something that's happened for around 30 plus years now, and it then moves over to Jojo Siwa, because obviously Jojo Siwa's fame, the rise to fame that she had in the early 2010s, came pretty much straight after Miley Cyrus stepped out of that industry, and it very much seems that what the documentary is trying to say here is that the industry now saw Miley Cyrus as no longer profitable, so they then moved on to other people to put into their corporate machine, and that individual in particular was Jojo Siwa. And I could completely understand the featuring of Jojo in this documentary because aside from my criticisms this year, I definitely think that Jojo is a victim of this industry. I do think that there have been a lot of terrible things that have happened to her, and I think the only reason that she hasn't been critical of that is because obviously she is the 1%, the 0.1% of people in Hollywood that do break through, they do get rich, and they do get famous, and because of that, they think that everything that's happened to them is perfectly normal and should happen to absolutely everyone because, hey, look at me, I'm a rich millionaire, and that is the way it's gonna go through everyone. Now, obviously, me and you, we're not silly. We know that's actually not the case, and Hollywood spits out so many child stars, forgets about them, and allows them to pretty much deal with all the mental trauma that they received from the industry by themselves. But yeah, what I'm trying to say here is I could understand if they spoke about Jojo but didn't necessarily feature her, where they go on to say, oh yeah, Jojo Siwa, for example, she was turned into a commodity, her life was made into this complete monetary thing of everything she does is for profit, but actually featuring her and interviewing her, given absolutely everything that's happened over the last year, to me personally really does take away from this documentary and everything that it's supposed to represent. It's a very strange choice, especially given the fact that they're not necessarily critical that Jojo herself has become a massive part of the machine that is Hollywood. But yeah, when Jojo first appears around 30 minutes into this documentary, what it pretty much is Jojo and Demi Lovato walking through Jojo's own house, and pretty much Demi is extremely shocked by the amount of merchandise that Jojo has, and pretty much there is every form of merch you can possibly think of, and Jojo is clearly laughing about it, she's clearly smiling, she thinks it's a pretty, I guess, normal thing. She isn't really critical of this, and that's quite interesting considering the whole point of this documentary is to criticize the fact that Hollywood turns children into a commodity. But yeah, Demi's walking around, and honestly, from the vibe I get, she does seem a little bit disgusted by how much Jojo has been turned into this monetary thing of she is no longer a human being, and for 10 plus years she was just Nickelodeon's cash cow. But then Jojo goes on to say her original spark to want to become famous was, yeah, she saw Miley Cyrus on TV playing Hannah Montana and she wanted to be that. And that is really interesting considering, again, this documentary is talking about how it's bad that children idolize child stars, yet Jojo herself literally has a TV show recently that pretty much preys on the idolization of child stars. The whole point of it is, hey, you want to be famous? You want to be a rich, famous dance star? Well, this show is the only way you're going to get that. And Jojo knows, obviously, that's going to put a lot of children under stress, and that is going to lead to good television. Translation, children crying in front of cameras, and weird-ass adults recording it being like, oh yeah, smile, well not smile, cry for the camera. Never understood it, never understood why people enjoy watching that stuff. If you do, please comment down below why you really enjoy watching stressed out children on TV. I'm not saying it's anything sinister, but I'm saying it is a bit weird to enjoy watching that type of television. But yes, going back to the documentary, after it shows Jojo's merch and her speaking to Demi about the merchandise and how much she's basically been turned into a commodity, it then shows a bunch of footage and other people talking in general about how bad and exploitative the industry is and how it creates self-esteem issues and how they destroy young stars' passion for music, their confidence, and just in general how exhausting and confusing the entire industry is, as children are absolutely overworked to the point of where, in some cases, they have mental breakdowns, they can't breathe anymore, and they have to have years and years of therapy. But I did think this was a bit of a weird thing to include straight after showing Jojo Siwa, because pretty much this entire thing that it's describing here happened in Jojo Siwa's own show, Siwa's Dance Pop Revolution, where people in the original Rolling Stone article spoke about how there were children on set almost passing out from sheer levels of exhaustion after being completely and utterly overworked. And yeah, when I first saw that back in March this year, I did just think that was another allegation that was featuring in this article, and I did actually believe it. But it's actually been proven by Jojo's own show, because as I said earlier, I went and watched Jojo's own show because I thought it was important to do so after watching this documentary, as I was watching it thinking this is incredibly hypocritical and now I need to go and get the full entire story. And it did turn out that full story was in Jojo's show, which did absolutely surprise me because I thought surely she's going to keep out all of the serious things that she's been accused of. But after I went and watched it, I took a load of notes during every single episode, and I was shocked with what I stumbled upon on this show. And I don't know if it's just because there was about 5 people, including myself, that actually watched Siwa's Dance Pop Revolution, but it was genuinely quite surprising, and I just want to go through some of the notes now so we can compare it to the documentary that Jojo's featuring in and demonstrate how much of a hypocrite Jojo is for featuring in this documentary. So starting off with my first note from episode 1, I noted that Jojo at the very beginning of the show says that she wants to make the first major kids pop group since the Jackson 5. And again, this is confusing considering the critical nature that this documentary has towards the commodification of children in the industry, and also just speaking about how the industry preys on people's talents and makes them no longer interested and passionate for music. Because just being like, oh, I want to make a pop group of individuals and I'm going to manage it, I'm going to be in charge of it, we're going to make a show on a streaming service ruled by $1 billion corporation. It's like, isn't this what we're being critical of? Isn't this just everything what's wrong with the industry? There's no natural going about this. It's just putting children up against each other in a competitive environment and making them pretty much emotionally fight with each other, whilst also having the mothers almost physically fight with each other. And the next note I wrote down is a quote of one of the mothers on the show saying, when she was 5, she put her child in dance shows, and speaks about how she saw potential in the kid. And my observation from this was that she seemed like she wanted to, as I said previously, live her own dream through her child and make money off her, which of course would be exploitation. And honestly, that's all these shows are, complete and utter exploitation. Do you really think that Jojo Siwa wants to make a show where she's working with a bunch of random kids, where she's promising them fame in these stressful environments? No, but she knows that it makes good TV. She knows that Dance Mums is something that was very popular at the time, and in my opinion, she just wants to recreate that because it probably is extremely profitable, which we'll get into when we speak about the contracts that these children receives in these shows. But then we move on to the next note, which speaks about how 12 minutes in, Jessalyn and Jojo were berating the kids, but also the parents were saying that the children were not doing enough. And I noticed that, yeah, in this show, parents are extremely demanding of their kids. They ask them to do so much, and it then leads to 18 minutes in episode 1, when one of the kids is clearly struggling to breathe and has to step outside and says, word for word, I'm trying to take a deep breath and nothing is coming in. And she then starts to burst into tears, thinking her dream is over. The camera gets in her face, records the whole thing, and tries to kind of present Jessalyn as this like wonderful person that comes to save the day by speaking to the kid. But realistically, the vibe I got from this was Jessalyn seems almost annoyed that the kid's doing this. She seems annoyed that they can't just continue to dance and this kid's wasting their time. And I got the vibe from that every single time a kid came into an issue throughout this show. And it's just really sick, in my opinion. I don't understand why that sort of thing needs to be on TV. They don't need to record a kid struggling to breathe and having to go to hospital and have tests. They could just say, oh, the kid had to leave for a minute. She was having a bit of a moment. It's personal. We don't want to get into it. Let's continue with the dancing. And then she could come back. But no, obviously, that wouldn't be good television. But then moving on to my notes from episode 2, things do not get better. As you can see, I quoted Jessalyn saying she's devastated people just don't want to dance, people being the children, and the children being the individuals who are exhausted from dancing all day. And then you can see another quote I took of Jojo saying she doesn't care what excuse it is because kids were simply not focusing on the dancing. But again, that just comes down to the fact that these kids were visibly, emotionally, and physically exhausted. You can see that halfway through some of the episodes, the kids just They want a break, man. They don't want to be doing this all day, every single day. Yes, they like dancing, but getting driven to the point of exhaustion every single day will absolutely destroy your passion in any industry. And then that takes us back to Demi Lovato's documentary and gives us the reason to why I watched Siwa's Dance Pop Revolution. Because isn't the whole purpose of this documentary to speak about how passion for music and passions for other skills gets completely destroyed by the Hollywood industry, and how children get turned into a commodity and overworked to a point of absolute mental and physical exhaustion? And is that not just what's going on in Jojo Siwa's own show? And does that not just make it even more confusing that she is featuring in this documentary, that she's going to the premiere of the documentary and being celebrated like some hero? It's all so utterly confusing and just makes Hollywood seem even more hypocritical than it already was. For example, in my episode 3 notes, I took a quote saying, "If you get tired, you push harder," and ironically enough, Jessalyn says that to Leigha Sanderson, the person who came out and exposed everything that went wrong on that show. And that's also a very weird thing to say to Leigha of all the people on the show, considering Leigha herself is very open about the fact that she deals with pain all the time. And this all comes from just the first 3 episodes. That's not even halfway through the show, and I'm not going to go through every other detail that I've written down, but I wanted to basically give you a bit of an understanding of how bad Siwa's Dance Pop Revolution is, because it's easy to look at this show from the face value and just see it as another kids dancing show, but the reality is this show is as bad as everything that Demi Lovato's documentary is criticizing. And of course, the reason for that is money. Jojo Siwa is a victim of an industry that wants to exploit children for financial gain, and Jojo herself is now exploiting children for her financial gain. And then that moves us into the documentary again, where Jojo actually speaks about the problematic contracts in the Hollywood industry. Which again is very weird that she is speaking about this in this documentary, considering Jojo herself has been criticized for this exact sort of thing. But yeah, Jojo goes on to speak about how when she was younger, she signed a deal with Nickelodeon, and pretty much that deal stated that they owned nearly everything to do with Jojo Siwa. And yeah, that is very disturbing. It is disturbing that children are being made, well, not made, but are being prompted and pressured into signing these very lucrative contracts, which they won't understand at the time. They'll have some lawyer who probably doesn't have Jojo Siwa or any other child star in the best interests. It's just, oh, if Jojo makes more money, I'm going to make more money. They'll prompt them into signing the contract, and they will be locked down for a very, very long period of time. And that contract will probably be very manipulative, very calculated, and absolutely will underpay the stars that sign those contracts. And yes, Jojo was a victim of that. For example, Jojo Siwa in one part of her contract only received a $4,000 payment despite being contracted to receive $10,000. And that's absolute. Oh no, wait. Oh, easy mistake. Sorry. That's what Jojo did to one of her stars. Sorry, we'll move into the actual issues that Jojo received. For example, Jojo was living in fear of saying absolutely anything against the corporate overlords in case she breached the Oh, look. Sorry, easy mistake. That's also what Jojo was doing in that contract. Sorry, we'll move on to the next part. Jojo as well was only receiving 2.8% of the merchandising revenue despite her face being all over the map. Sorry, I've done it again. Sorry, that's also in the contract that Jojo gave out to her child stars on Siwa's Dance Pop Revolution. I'm sorry. It's a little mistake that I just keep on making. Okay, but seriously, Jojo does go on. I know it sounds like I'm going to make a joke again, but I'm actually not. Jojo does go on to state that the contracts that she signed were pretty much terrible. She word for word says, basically, I signed an umbrella deal for everything. So they owned all my rights to everything except for social media. We really wanted to keep that separate, but if I had a brand deal, I had to get it improved by Nickelodeon. So that was always that. But yeah, they own everything. And then she goes on to say, when I was 17, it just became something I didn't want to be a part of at all, and I would do anything I could to break away from it or get out of it. And I think the sad part about this is this would all make so much sense that Jojo got out of it and she is acting in the way that she's been acting this year and is now featuring on this big expose documentary, if Jojo wasn't putting these contracts onto other individuals themselves. This is a real quote from an article earlier this year. After the show ended, the Sandersons and other sources close to the group allege the competitive aspect did not end. XOMG Pop members were required to put in endless hours making Snapchats, TikToks, and YouTube content. There was no direct compensation for that labor, but according to the Sandersons and two sources close to the situation, the girls were promised a $500 prize if their TikTok got the most views in a given week. At first, Leigha says she enjoyed making the videos, but they quickly got more cutthroat. Everyone was still pitted against each other at the entire time, and then let's also include that they were also only receiving 2.8% of merchandising revenue. I mean, realistically, that all sounds very similar to everything that Jojo was criticizing in this documentary, and again, it just makes you even more confused and just depressed that these documentaries are very important. There have been a lot of them coming out recently where they expose the dark nature behind Hollywood, but despite that, we can't take this seriously because of Jojo's inclusion here. And Jojo may argue that her contracts that she gives out to her child stars aren't as, I don't know, manipulative or calculated as the one that she received when she was a kid, but honestly, from the more I read, the more I would disagree with that. Because there are some really dodgy things going on in these contracts due to some suspicious loopholes, like social media work and brand deals not coming under the Coogan Trust rule, which is pretty much a law designed to protect child stars of where a portion of a payment that a child receives must go into a Coogan Trust fund, where they will receive that fund when they turn 18. But this law is a quite outdated law, and yeah, it doesn't cover things like brand deals and social media, and it kind of seems, despite the industry is now very much, completely bent on focusing on social media, there aren't enough laws and regulation to protect child stars in this part of the industry now, and it seems that contracts like this very much, in my opinion, are taking advantage of that. In my opinion, if Jojo really did care about changing the industry and making things better and different, she would see these issues in the contracts that she hands out to her child stars and just say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to change things up because I know how that feels and I don't want other stars to go through that. That's the whole thing with this. I'm not actually against child stars existing. Obviously, that's a world which just can't happen. There's always going to be child actors. So I'd rather just accommodate that. I'd rather the industry changes for the better of giving children contracts that aren't predatory, the contracts that they actually understand and protect children. I don't want to sound like that person from The Simpsons of think about the children.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
But the reality is, my friends, Hollywood is one of the most vicious and despicable industries out there, and it hasn't changed much at all when it comes to protecting child stars, and someone like Jojo Siwa could have been a light in the dark of protecting children and changing the rules and the game in general, but no, she just did everything, in my opinion, that happened to her. Which is a real shame because in this documentary, aside from the issues of contracts and stuff like that, Jojo speaks about how she was blacklisted by Nickelodeon when she came out a few years ago. And Jojo went from pretty much hosting multiple shows for Nickelodeon, and the moment she came out, they then pretty much just ceased all contact when it came to hosting shows. They eventually came out and said, I guess it was a mistake that they did that. But Jojo goes on in this documentary to speak about when she originally came out, they said, you need to go speak to all of our brand partners and explain yourself. Explain what? That she's gay. It's like, what's there to explain? And I think that's a despicable thing. And that's why I still say Jojo Siwa is definitely a victim in this industry and one of the biggest victims, in my opinion. And that's why it makes it even more confusing that she chooses to go down this real egregious and terrible path. She could change things for the better, but I guess she just doesn't really want to. She could come out and say, oh, I'm standing up for people right now by, acting all goofy and wacky in my TikToks. But it's like, you're just doing things that Miley Cyrus was doing 10 years ago. You're not changing the game in any way. You're just doing the most generic, rebellious star phase thing. It doesn't change anything. And you're still doing the exact same thing the industry has been doing for 10, 20, 30 plus years. And one funny note, which is a little bit of a nitpick that I want to mention, is that when they were going through this whole, issue of Nickelodeon blacklisting Jojo Siwa, they show screenshots of influencers supporting Jojo when she came out, and it just flashes James Charles on the screen. I was like, whoa, I don't think you want that bloke in a documentary about child safety. I don't know why he's in it, but yeah, I don't know. I thought it was funny. Please subscribe. I'm on my knees, please. But yeah, this documentary has undoubtedly been a PR success for Jojo Siwa, and another one at that. It seems that Jojo in the media over the last 6 months has just been building and building her PR, and yeah, there have been mishaps here and there, but the reality is all the things that we've gone through in the Rolling Stones article over the last 6 months, my criticism of this documentary, it's not being mentioned anywhere. The media don't care about that stuff, and that to me is the whole glaring issue here. They're just happy to have their interviews with Jojo. They don't want to upset the corporate overlords, because if they do that, they're going to lose money, because they make money from interviews. And I kind of, as I said earlier, in a sick, twisted way, get it. It's the Hollywood machine. But if you're going to feature in a documentary about the Hollywood machine, surely you should detach yourself from that machine. Jojo has been seen at the premiere with a lot of the other people that featured in this documentary, and it just confuses me, because I feel like a lot of these people had good things and genuine things to say, but it all kind of loses a bit of input and impact when they're hanging out with Jojo. Again, it's just weird. It is just really weird, and I don't want to act like Jojo Siwa is the worst person on planet Earth, but I'm just kind of sad, disappointed, and confused by the whole thing. I definitely think there is still a chance for redemption. She could compensate Leigha Sanderson for her time and the other stars in XOMG Pop and Siwa's Dance Pop Revolution. She could start to speak more up about the industry, start to give better contracts to child stars, but she could have done that 3 years ago, and she didn't. And I don't think she's still going to. And that's why I think these documentaries really don't mean anything if you yourself are going to be a hypocrite. But yes, with the release of the show, it did lead to a lot of people speaking about pretty much everything that I've spoken about in today's video. And that did cause some individuals out there to do some digging. And they actually found a recent post made by, I guess, Jojo Siwa's management, of where Jojo right now is appealing or requesting for young dancers to come to her aid. And it's like, Jojo, have you not done this enough? Like, geez, could you leave the child dancers alone for a day and just give the pain to the adults? But yeah, pretty much Jojo is hosting a dance event, a charity dance event, and obviously I'm not going to criticize charity, but Jojo, if you do want to give the money to me instead, my PayPal, I can send it to you right. Jojo's hosting a charity event, and good for her. But what I did find interesting about this event was that it comes with a schedule, and the schedule gives us a bit of an insight into the, I guess, grueling schedule that Jojo has historically put on her child stars. And this is going to be quite interesting, because yes, this is for a charity event, so naturally the workload isn't going to be as bad as if it was for Jojo's own pop group, and that mainly comes from the fact that, in my opinion anyway, Jojo is not making any money from this, therefore she's not going to put it on the top of her priority list, and of course she's not going to spend that much time on this. But then when you look at this schedule, it still is very, very busy, especially when you consider she's working with young child stars. As you can see here, the younger dancers will be working from 1 to 8 p.m. on Saturday, 1 to 5 p.m. on Sunday, 3:30 to 9 p.m. on Monday, and then all day on Tuesday. Doesn't necessarily entail what all day is. Are they literally waking up at 5 a.m. and working until the next day at 1 a.m.? Not 100% too sure, but all day is pretty extensive, especially when you read that it also includes a performance. And then again, on Wednesday, it's the same thing of all day plus a performance. Now, yes, this is obviously all for a good cause. It's all for charity. And, the parents should know what they're putting their kids in for here when it comes to that schedule appearing. And I guess this is better than not including any schedule and just throwing them straight into the deep end. But at the end of the day, this is a very, very grueling process. From what I can read here, it's around 30 hours of dancing over the space of around 4 days for a lot of young kids. And that's pretty insane to consider that this schedule is the public information one, so only imagine what the schedule is for the young dancers that appeared on Siwa's Dance Pop Revolution. I can imagine it was far worse, and that probably explains why some people were were nearly passing out on the show when they could barely breathe out of sheer exhaustion. But then after I discovered this schedule, it did cause me to do even more of a deep dive, because then I discovered that Leigha Sanderson's mother, Angie, actually has a Reddit account, which she's been using rather actively. She has been, over the last year, been pretty much exposing Jessalyn and Jojo for multiple things, which really weren't included in the document. It was like added information, and I was just scrolling through her entire account, and I was just shocked that I don't believe I've seen anyone cover this account, because pretty much it is just direct expose after direct expose of her calling out Jessalyn and Jojo for all of the things that happened on set. For example, in this post from earlier this year, it's Angie complaining that Leigha has still not been paid for what she was fully owed. And yes, that comment was made about 3 months ago now, so maybe she's been compensated, but I haven't seen anything to necessarily suggest that, and I feel like if that had happened, maybe the Siwa's PR team would have made a statement. But yeah, it's pretty ironic considering Jojo herself was speaking about dodgy contracts in the industry when it's clear her dodgy contracts have put people in a lot of financial peril. But things only continued when people on the XOMG Reddit group were questioning members leaving the group, and Angie chirped in, basically alluding to something bad happening by basically saying it's all a sad mess and that members didn't leave for no reason, and that Jess and Jojo should regret their actions that ruined the opportunity for all the girls. And I'm not going to go through every single post here, but pretty much every single one is a bit of a damning statement on Jojo and Jessalyn and how they handled this entire situation. As you can just see here, it does just show to us that the environment on the set of Jojo Siwa's Dance Pop Revolution was far worse than we ever possibly thought, and it does then make you even more confused to Jojo's inclusion in this documentary. Maybe the people behind the scenes that were producing this documentary just genuinely didn't know about this, but I think that's a really hard thing to buy. And talking of buying, there even seems to be financial complications going on behind the scenes, according to Angie, as somebody in the XOMG Pop Reddit group just simply asked, are they ever going to release the XOMG dolls? And Angie claims no, they were dropped after the Siwas fired Leigha. All the toys went away and there was a lot. Leigha was the prototype of the doll. They tried to blame us, but it was their own ego that got in the way of all the girls' success. Now, what Angie is saying here is of course just a claim from herself. There's no facts being laid out here, but in terms of the whole blaming aspect of blaming everybody else rather than taking any responsibility, we're going to go into an interview later on in this video which does show to us that the Siwas definitely have a bit of a habit of blaming everyone for everything that's ever gone wrong other than themselves. But to carry on, Angie says they thought the girls were expendable because they were the important ones. I guess not. The girls were not expendable and were not replaceable, so no toys. And then she claims that the toy company dropped the Siwas altogether. And yeah, obviously this isn't necessarily the worst thing on planet Earth, but it is quite interesting that the companies financially involved with Jojo Siwa allegedly saw this situation and thought, we've got to pull out of this. But then things got even more interesting when somebody was reading a preview of an XOMG Pop booklet, and in the book it says, thousands of kids auditioned on Zoom. 21 girls went to Los Angeles for in-person auditions and 11 made it onto the show, but only 3 of those brilliant talented girls, Brooklyn, Dallas, and Tiny T, got to wear the official XOMG Pop jackets. And pretty much, the Reddit user posting this outright claims that they are being gaslit right now, that history is being altered. As the Reddit user says, this is a straight up lie. There were not 3 original members, there were 7, and all of them were treated horribly. And yeah, it basically does seem that the network or whoever is in control of these booklets and merchandise is trying to gloss over the history and even change the entire thing thing to make it seem that Leigha wasn't involved directly in the final process, which she was, which is obviously a terrible thing, but at this point I'm not shocked. And Angie went and added, try as they might, they can't rewrite history. It's on Peacock for all to see. They are a joke for this, and the fact that Scholastic went along with the lies turns my stomach, especially when the original girls were in the meetings. The only one I am unsure of is Kaya, but I think she was in one meeting about it. So gross. And yeah, these Reddit posts are genuinely quite surprising because I thought they would have at least been picked up by some random media article out there, but there was absolutely nothing. So when I stumbled across all of this, I was genuinely really shocked, and I think it does just represent that things are far worse than we possibly thought they were. But yeah, just in general, things aren't necessarily looking that good. Not only are Jojo and Jessalyn being exposed on Reddit for multiple different things, but also, as I said earlier, Leigha and Angie are now working with, I guess, a company on a documentary about everything going on. And just in general, in a year's time, I'm really interested to see where we will be in regards to, I guess, the perception of Jojo Siwa. Because right now, Jojo is seen as more of like a memeable figure. Yes, not everyone out there loves her and thinks she's this amazing person. But realistically, when it comes to the things that I keep on harping on about in these videos, I don't think that the general wider audience actually knows about this. And it really does confuse me, considering that if this was to happen to any other influencer or star, it would be such a talking point. Obviously, in regards to what's happening with Mr. Beast right now, especially with things on set, that's being spoke about so unbelievably much, and rightly so. But with Jojo Siwa's, it's barely even mentioned other than a few YouTube videos here and there, and it does just confuse me. But on top of all the alleged mistreatment that has taken place on these sets, it also gets made even more worse by the fact that Jojo Siwa, to this day, as I said earlier, is still defending Abby Lee Miller, and that does lead us nicely into our next chapter, which is the interview that Jojo recently did with Abby. And honestly, this interview just makes things a million times worse. And again, I'm just confused to why she would do this, but also feature in this documentary. It just makes no sense. And I would like to have some like middle ground take on this of, oh, you know, maybe I can understand this thing and maybe this would make reasoning here and make sense. But no, honestly, none of this makes sense. Now, Abby Lee Miller is somebody that genuinely confuses me when it comes to Hollywood, because it kind of seems that she has pretty much gotten away with her heinous mistreatment of a lot of children on set over the years, and she now, I guess, in 2024 is somewhat disgraced after multiple former child stars came out and spoke against Abby Lee Miller, and just in general, how they now view Abby in a terrible light. But despite all of that criticism that Abby is, I guess, facing nowadays, I really am confused why these shows are still getting so much traction. I'm really confused why anybody would want to watch that stuff, but also what makes me even more confused is the fact that Jojo has this obsession with defending Abby Lee Miller, not just once, not just twice, but multiple times. She has recently, as I said, gone onto a podcast with Abby Lee Miller, doing an interview where they speak about a multitude of different things, and part of that was defending Abby Lee Miller from all of the criticism that she's received over the years, which is just quite insane considering this interview came out a month before Jojo featured in a documentary which complains and criticizes the child entertainment industry. I mean, where is the shame? Where is the lack of self-awareness? To me personally, it's just quite embarrassing that she's gone and done this. Obviously, everything before is also quite embarrassing, and you do have to say, where is the self-awareness? But this, in particular, is the main case for it. Because Abby Lee Miller is the figure that really does represent this type of television that gained a lot of popularity during the 2000s and 2010s. Abby is one of the main reasons that this became normalized, so Jojo's friendship and attachment to this person, and the fact that she still continuously does everything she can to pretty much rectify Abby's reputation, is absolutely mind-blowing, considering how much damage, in my opinion, Abby has done to so many people out there. And I'm not going to go through every single aspect of this podcast, but there are a few clips that I've taken out out that I want to go through. In particular, this part right here, where Jojo admits that she actually uses a lot of the things that Abby Lee Miller taught her in her career to this day, which is obviously interesting considering all of the context that we've gone through so far in this video.
Candace Salazar asks, what was the transition like from Dance Moms to where you are now as an individual performer?
Performing. Honestly, I use a lot of the information that you taught me, and that Gia taught me, and that just the show in general taught me. Still to this day, I still backstage do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I still kiss, Nene, knock, knock.
I think this is quite interesting because what she's saying here is absolutely true. I mean, we have seen Jojo take every single thing that Abby Lee Miller normalized in Dance Moms. She's kind of toned it down a little bit and made it into her own show. And I feel like that's quite insane, again, considering she featured in a documentary, but also it's a real sad story because sure, Jojo got rich and famous from this industry, but at the end of the day, how she got to that point of rich and fame, in my opinion, isn't right. No child should have to work the amount that she worked. No child should be put through those insane schedules of training every single day, being screamed at on camera, having that shown to the world to millions of people. No child should have to go through that. And it's sad that the cycle has now repeated where Jojo is now taking all of those skills, well, I mean, not skills, but all of those lessons from Abby Lee Miller and applying it to even more children in the world. And it is just incredibly disappointing to hear. And you know, we always knew this. We always knew that Jojo was taking inspiration from Abby Lee Miller, but just to hear her admit it a month before featuring in that documentary is just quite insane and in general extremely hypocritical. But now we need to move into the main part of the podcast I want to speak about, which is a direct defense of Abby Lee Miller. And some of the things that Jojo says here are just in general quite indefensible.
Last question. Sydney Banks, are you closer to Abby than you are to the other girls? And I just want to piggyback off of that and just say you always are so not defensive, but like one to speak out in favor of all that Abby has done, especially, you know, publicly. And
super defensive. I absolutely am defensive against you for sure.
Like what drives you to that? And, you know, like, everybody always probably has an opinion about that.
Yeah.
So just anyway, what would you like to say?
To me, you don't ask for your flowers, but you know that you deserve your flowers.
I don't know what she means by you don't ask for your flowers, but you deserve your flowers. I mean, what does she deserve in this situation? She has made millions of dollars off making children cry on television. She's been criticized for things such as this, and she has still gotten away with it. She still lives in a massive house. She's still extremely successful and wealthy. What more does this woman deserve? In my opinion, she hasn't faced many repercussions or enough criticism for the things that she did on Dance Moms. Obviously nothing illegal took place, but just the sheer level of treatment of the people on those shows, I don't think she deserves any flowers, and she deserves much, much more criticism. And the fact that Jojo of all people is saying this is just so unbelievably wild, but it only continues to get worse.
And I think you deserve a lot more flowers than people have given you. And I think that my job is to kind of overcompensate and to overstand up for you because enough people don't.
I mean, you can't stand up for what Abby Lee Miller represents and at the same time appear in a documentary that stands up for the mistreatment of child stars in the entertainment industry. The two things do not correlate. They directly contradict each other. How are you standing up for this but also featuring in a documentary that speaks against that type of treatment? That to me is just absolutely wild, and I am going to keep on jumping in between these clips here because I am pretty much doing a live reaction right now because there is just so much I can say about all of this. But yeah, let's continue.
And I think where I'm really grateful is that I have a very loud voice in girls that have come from this show. if not the loudest voice.
The loudest voice.
Thank you.
Yes, Jojo does have the loudest voice, and that means she has the most responsibility out of everyone that came from Dance Mums. And in my opinion, she has completely neglected that responsibility in the name of making even more money and building her businesses. It's a shame, but it's the reality of the situation. The other people, they can't speak up as much. Their voice won't be as heard as much. But Jojo, you know that your voice will be heard. And rather than stand up for individuals out there that have faced mistreatment, you still stick on the side of the people that place that mistreatment onto those child stars. And it's just incredibly disappointing.
I think that I'm the only one that has no benefit in tearing you down.
I mean, what benefit do the people from Dance Mums take from speaking against the corporate overlords that hosted or produced Dance Mums? There is no benefit there. We have literally seen that when you speak against the industry, you get blacklisted. Jojo Siwa is someone that has been blacklisted before for speaking up about themselves. So why would she then mock people for speaking up against others for their mistreatment? To me personally, it's just an absolutely wild thing to do, and again, another direct contradiction. I'd say I don't understand why Jojo is so insistent on defending Abby Lee Miller, but in my opinion, it comes from not only guilt that she knows that she has made so much money from Dance Mums, but also she knows that she has taken the formula of Dance Mums and used it to her advantage, so she's now in a position where she has to defend that, because if she doesn't, it's only going to make her look even more hypocritical. And that's only proven even further in the next parts that I'm going to show you, where Abby and Jojo pretty much just go on to flex all of the successful things that they've done and just say, none of you guys that spoke up against Abby have those things because I guess they spoke up, which in itself is another contradiction.
I know you get it.
I do.
Because you left Dance Moms and you've done So You Think You Can Dance reality show.
Mm-hmm.
You did the what's the Special Forces?
Special Forces, Masked Singer. I've done 8
reality
Fox
show.
TV shows.
You did the Masked Singer.
Dance
you,
with the Stars.
You get it.
Yeah.
You get it's a TV show and how it works.
Just a quick note here, but I love that they don't mention Siwa's Dance Ball Revolution here. There's no mention of the show where multiple serious allegations have come from it. It's just the show that did well for you there, the show that did well for the other one. We'll put that to the side. No one needs to hear about that. I don't know. I just thought it was incredibly fishy that they didn't include that in that list there.
Those kids have done nothing else.
Well, there's a reason why. And it's because the one show that they did get to do, they shit on after.
It's incredibly interesting that Jojo Siwa not only rightfully criticized the industry for blacklisting people, but then, in my opinion, she word for word says, if you've got a negative opinion about the thing where you've been horribly mistreated, you are going to lose everything. That's what she's saying there. She's saying that the reason that they're no longer getting the opportunities that I get is because they actually speak against the mistreatment, whereas I won't speak against it. I'll accept it and actually participate in it. That is such a despicable and heinous thing to say, especially, and I'm sorry if I sound like a ticking clock, right? Is that the right phrase? I'm sorry if I keep repeating myself, because yeah, Jojo featured in this documentary, and then she's basically mocking people for speaking up against their personal experiences. It's wild. I genuinely was shocked when I heard this, because I thought, oh, maybe it's going to be a fairly nuanced and balanced approach to the defense, but no, this is the staunchest defense that Jojo has made yet, and it really is confusing considering this is a month before Demi Lovato's documentary.
I think you always have to remember where you came from, and you always have to remember the people that took a chance on you. And
Took a chance. I took Jill by the arm and sat her in a chair in our retail store
right,
and said, interview this woman.
right,
She needs to be on the show.
right. You fought for everybody. And yes, you were tough. Yes, everyone had their own experience. Absolutely.
Go into the specifics, Jojo. Go into the specifics that there are videos still uploaded to this day of children having mental breakdowns on camera being, I guess, described as entertaining content. Tell us about that and explain why that's a morally right thing to do and why you still to this day are defending that style of content and why you are still participating in that style of content. Explain to us why. Because describing it as tough is not a justification. It's not. Maybe you could apply that to adults. Maybe if you're being tough on an adult in a workplace, maybe. But even then, probably not. Because recording people crying and having breakdowns isn't a dance show. That's just mistreatment. What about this is to do with drama? Absolutely nothing. And just describing it as tough is just a poor misrepresentation of everything that happened on Dance Mums.
At the end of the day, everyone has to realize their life and their career would not exist if it wasn't for you. Not Dance Moms, you. Because Dance Moms Miami happened and it didn't work. You are Dance Moms.
Now, I'm going to say something here which is a bit controversial because I'm comparing it to a very, very worst person in Hollywood. And obviously, I'm not saying that Abby Lee Miller has committed anything close to what this person has done. She hasn't committed a crime as far as I know. I just think she's morally been a wrong person. But the argument that Jojo is making here is, of course, you can't speak up because, I don't know, this person made you famous. Abby Lee Miller made you famous and you shouldn't speak up against them about your mistreatment. But if we applied that logic in other situations, that would make things so unbelievably worse. And the person I'm going to mention is Dan Schneider. That man is responsible for so many child stars being famous. But are we now going to say that they can't speak up against Dan Schneider? Are we really going to do that because he made them famous and, you know, started their careers in some sense? Are we going to say that? Obviously not. And I don't think we should say that in much lighter situations like this. Everybody should have the right to speak about their personal situations, their personal experiences, including the individuals that happen to appear on Dance Mums. Just because Abby Lee Miller is responsible for them being famous doesn't mean that Abby Lee Miller can get away with absolutely everything. And I should just say that, again, obviously Abby Lee Miller isn't even like, I'm not trying to like compare them. I'm just saying that if we applied that logic in Hollywood, it would make things a million times worse. And again, Jojo, you're literally in a documentary which speaks up against the industry. By your logic, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be speaking up against Nickelodeon because they gave you a platform. Obviously, that's silly logic, but that is your own logic.
I just don't.
I'm tearing up.
I don't like when people take that from you, and I don't like when people get on you because it's fun.
People aren't doing it because it's fun. People are doing it because they had horrible personal experiences on Dance Mums, and they have the full right to speak up against it, just like you spoke up against your experiences in Demi Lovato's documentary. What's the difference between you and them? The difference is you don't like it when people are calling out your business practices for being terrible, and you don't like it when people are calling out your personal friends who made you rich and famous. That's why you have a problem with it.
And I did fight for those kids.
Of course you did.
Every one of them.
Of course you did.
Yes.
And you...
For better costumes, for better music, for better this, for more time, for everything.
I can't even imagine the stress that you were under with that show. And there was so much more going on in your life than us 7 girls.
I mean, my dog died. My mother died.
Yeah.
I was indicted by the federal government.
Yeah, I'm really sad to hear about Abby Lee Miller's stress. I can't imagine the stress that the kids were. Oh, no, wait. I can imagine the stress because it was monetized. It was made into an actual show. Look at these thumbnails. Actually, I'm going to blur the thumbnails. But what is on screen right now is a child crying. And by the way, I've not even found the screenshots yet. But I can imagine it says something like breakdown or in tears or something on those lines. These kids were clearly very stressed out. So excuse me if I don't necessarily care too much about the stress of the person that was putting the stress onto those kids.
You were trying to run a real business.
Yeah.
Like,
Let's remember that one too.
Like, there's so much more that goes on than what people see and what people remember. And I think, unfortunately, we remember what we see on TV. Right? So those girls, right? The other girls, myself, the moms, all of us, you, we see, I'll use me as an example. Jojo, have you learned nothing? You see that clip, you see you yelling at me. So I remember automatically being in a room, asking a simple question and getting yelled at
screamed
for it.
Right.
That's not how it went. I don't remember what happened before, and I don't remember what happened, but I remember that is not all that happened.
No, of course not.
You know what I mean? And so that's where it's like, unfortunately, you do only get to see your panic attack on TV or your stressful moment or throwing up from stress, but you don't get to see all the
That went
good
into
times.
it.
Jojo, are you hearing yourself right now? Oh, you don't get to see all the moments, but you do get to see a 9-year-old have a panic attack on TV. That's perfectly normal. It's like, Jojo, your defense is insane. Saying that, not everything is shown, but the panic attacks are shown. Why is the child having a panic attack? Why are they breaking down? Why are there multiple videos uploaded to this day of children having these mental breakdowns? Why? It's no justification that, you don't get the full context. All I need to really know is that there is a kid having a mental breakdown out of sheer exhaustion or because they're scared of the person that being shouted at on this dance show. I don't really need much more context. And yes, it all worked out for you, but it didn't work out for everybody else.
Yeah.
The not entertaining stuff. Nobody wants to see a happy person on TV. No one does. There's no reality TV show that is successful because people are just happy and great. Like,
know.
it's
Again, is this a justification for showing kids having panic attacks and mental breakdowns on television? Because if it is, it's a really, really bad defense. Just because it's a normality in the Hollywood industry doesn't mean that it should be something that continues because to you that's a normal thing. Maybe you, as the person that got famous from that stuff, should now be a shining beacon of we can change this, we can make the industry better. Because why does a dance show need to rely on children having panic attacks for entertainment? The show should be focused on dancing, not focused on making kids have breakdowns on set for entertainment value.
I think it's just unfortunate because you do see the drama, and this is where, like, I can give the other girls sympathy, right? They see the drama, and so that's just what they remember because that's what they've been conditioned to remember.
I guess. Some of them, Jojo, we have to wrap it up, but my relationships with them and things they've come out and said, and it's like, how do you not remember what I remember? How do you not remember me buying you your first pair of point shoes for your birthday? Like, what?
Again, none of this is a justification. None of this is a defense. You can do a million nice things to one person, but you can do one terrible thing. And those million nice things you did doesn't really outweigh that terrible thing. You can mistreat these kids on set, make them work to a point of exhaustion, make them work to a point of having a panic attack and record that for monetary value. But that doesn't get justified by the fact you bought them a birthday present. Oh, the rich, famous individual on set who has lots of money bought somebody a present one time. That makes this all okay. Of course not. And how they're shaping this whole thing out is just absolutely despicable. They're basically saying you're misremembering things. That's insane. And obviously they're saying this because, in my opinion, they have guilt and they know what happened, but they obviously can't admit to those things. Abby knows that she overworked individuals, but she's trying to justify it in her mind. So many people have spoke up about these shows. It's not a sheer coincidence.
That's
is so
not
close.
going to benefit them in any way. And that's... People really like quick things, right? People like a quick view or a quick...
But like you said, they're not on anything because they showed on the show they were on. I don't think that benefits them. Maybe it got you the cover of a magazine.
Right.
Because you agreed to talk about me.
And in the end of the day, you look foolish. Even just now doing so, you think you can dance. Some of the kids that were on the show, I shouldn't say kids, they're young adults, that were on the show left and got eliminated and then immediately started talking it. You look like a fool, dude. Like, don't be saying that you had the worst time. You didn't.
You don't know if in 5 years you're going to come back as a choreographer on the show. Well, you're not.
Right. You just ruined that.
You ruined that.
And now when the next show is going to look to see how it's like you have to just be grateful and not greedy, but hungry.
Again, what they're basically saying there is shut up, keep quiet, and we'll keep giving you roles and money. That's what they're saying. And that is absolutely wild to hear, considering everything that we've discussed in today's video. I genuinely don't know if they can't hear themselves here, but what they're saying is you should be grateful for the opportunity you've got, regardless of all the bad times and the horrible things that may have happened. Be grateful that we allowed you onto our wonderful show. And hey, if you ever say anything negative, all your opportunities are gonna be gone. Look at all the others that it happened to. They're now doing nothing. But look at Jojo Siwa, who doesn't say anything bad about me. She's doing great. Be like Jojo Siwa. It all is so unbelievably, honestly, borderline evil. The fact that they're saying this about an industry which is so known for mistreatment and horrible things, to me personally, is just absolutely wild, especially when you correlate Demi Lovato's documentary into all of this. It's just, I'm actually kind of lost for words of how hypocritical somebody can be. And when I make these videos, I feel like some people may think, oh, he's doing another Jojo Siwa video. What, like, it's going to be some very bland thing of, oh, she did this on TikTok. But I think this is a very extreme thing, and I'm genuinely shocked that it's not being spoken about as much as the Mr. Beast stuff, because to me personally, Jojo Siwa is a major content creator who has a lot of hands in a lot of pies. She's somebody that does a lot of different things, and she is still working with a lot of child stars, and I wouldn't be surprised if she got another television show in the future where she works with younger dance stars, where she takes the same Dance Mums formula and applies it into her new show. Of course, that is just speculation, but based on what I'm hearing there, they don't sound sorry. They don't sound apologetic over what may have happened on those shows. They're just still saying to this day, we gave you an opportunity. And it's just so utterly despicable. To kind of conclude everything that we've gone through today, I think hypocrite is the word of the day, because I genuinely don't understand how Jojo had the nerve to go into Demi Lovato's documentary, speak about her experiences, be critical of multiple companies out there, yet in the same month she then says that you shouldn't speak up against people because you should be grateful, and if you speak up against us, you're not going to get opportunities anymore. It's insane, it's contradictory, and things really, in my opinion, are only getting worse for Jojo Siwa. But because she's such a media darling, I doubt it's going to lead to anything. I imagine in a year's time, even if Leigha Sanderson's documentary comes out and it's a complete expose, nothing will come from it, because Jojo Siwa is very good at PR. She knows what to say. She knows not what to say. I feel like this podcast was a bit of a rare slip of where she word for word says absolutely terrible things. I feel like usually I'm pretty open to growth and change and, being a bit of a middle ground in conversations where something like this could happen, of where, Jojo is a victim of the industry and maybe she's struggling to get out of it. But no, clearly she's just trying to capitalize on that same industry that made her famous, and it is utterly sickening. But I would love to know what you guys think about this. Please go down below, comment your opinions, and let me know what you really think about this situation, because honestly, it's absolutely wild, and I feel like it's gonna only continue over the next year, and I will continue to cover it. So please subscribe if you want more of that, or other videos out there, deep dives, commentary videos, whatever you want to call them. And yeah, that is the ending of the video. Thank you very much for coming along. Do I have anything to promote? Yeah, Buddy's podcast. Please go subscribe to it. Please like this video. Please share it around, because I think it needs to be spoken about. I mean, if you want to just go make your own videos about it, you're more than welcome to. But to make it easier for yourself, please share this video. Please like it. Please comment. And thank you very much for coming along. I'm going to go have a nap. And yeah, bye-bye, everybody. Peace out. See you later.